Okay, I think we are live. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Pagan Happy Hour. Cheers, guys. We made it to Friday. So, thank you all who are joining me today. If you are new here and this is your first Pagan Happy Hour, this is really just an opportunity for us all to chat about different pagan topics. And I really encourage you all to share your thoughts, share your ideas in the comments. So, I'm going to be looking at the comments as I am chatting and bringing your ideas and thoughts into the conversation. And before I get started, please in the comments let me know if you can see and hear me all right so that I know the technology is working okay. And also let me know where you are tuning in from and what you're drinking today. So I love seeing you guys coming from everywhere. It's so fun to see that. So definitely share in the comments while I take a sip here of my old fashioned. That's what I'm drinking today. Let's see, I see someone tuning in from the UK. It's definitely late there, so thank you for staying up for me. Let's see, I see people tuning in from Nevada, Boston, Oklahoma, Wales, Chicago, New York City, Texas, Colorado, England, Quebec, Huntsville, Alabama, Kansas, Missouri. So, well, thank you guys for sharing with me. It's so fun that you guys tune in to this. I know we can't all have a physical happy hour, especially with the world as chaotic as it is now. So a digital happy hour is probably the second best. But yeah, I thought we would talk a bit today about paganism and how to create a daily pagan practice. And earlier on my Instagram, I was asking people what they do to kind of keep a daily pagan practice, and it was really fun seeing the responses. So feel free as I'm chatting to share what you do and share the ways that you incorporate paganism into your daily life. But yeah, we're going to jump into that in a second. I'm going to have another sip of my drink and then we'll start the chat. Oh, and also feel free to ask questions as I'm chatting too, and that way I can answer those and bring them into the conversation. So for me, when I think about creating a daily spiritual practice, or specifically in this case, a daily pagan practice, I think it can be really intimidating, or you feel like there's all these things you need to do. And I don't want you to feel intimidated or feel like there's a checklist of daily tasks that you need to complete in order to be a pagan. That's definitely not the case. And one of the best things about paganism is that we create our own paths. There's no one telling us what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. So it really gives us a lot of freedom and space to formulate the spirituality that fits our own lifestyle and our own day-to-day life. So I see a few of you guys mentioning a few ways that you incorporate paganism on the daily. I see Barbara mentions tarot readings as something she does daily. I see the spinning dancer mentions fresh flowers, food, water, and candles. Yeah, those are some great ways to bring paganism into the everyday. So again, keep commenting, keep sharing as I'm chatting about some of the ways I like to bring paganism into my daily life. And I want to start with some things that are not necessarily specifically pagan, but a bit more mundane, but I still derive a lot of spirituality from them. So we're going to start with some more mundane things, and then we're going to get a bit more spiritual, a bit more pagan, a bit more witchy perhaps. So one of the things I like to ask myself is, how can I connect with nature every day? Because paganism is an earth-based religion. Before paganism really existed, there was animism. And that's what everyone practiced before formalized religion was created. And animism is a belief that there is a spirit or some type of divine essence in everything, in everything in the natural world. And one of the neat things, if you ever visit Japan or a Shinto shrine, and Shinto is still kind of an animistic religion, sometimes you'll see sacred trees or rocks that have a braided rope around them. And that designates that the priests in the Shinto faith believe that there is a kami, or a divine spirit, within that tree. So kind of going out into nature and finding the divine in those natural spaces, to me, is one of the best ways that we can connect with not just paganism, but even back further to animism, to the earliest religion or the earliest spirituality that was practiced by our ancestors all over the world. So for me, I try and take a daily walk. And I know that sounds super simple and super kind of silly and mundane, but by forcing myself to get out in nature and to notice the world around me, to notice the plant life, to notice the subtle change in the seasons, and even forcing myself to go outside when the weather's kind of cloudy and rainy and cold, there's still beauty to be found. And that's one of the most simple things that I started doing every day that I feel like really helped me develop a stronger connection with the spirits of the land, kind of the divine essence that in my view exists everywhere and in everything. And it's something super simple that you can try. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention, is just going for a daily walk. And it doesn't have to be a long walk. Just getting yourself out in nature, to me, is one of the best ways to incorporate paganism into your daily life. So I'm going to check your comments over here while I have a sip, and let me know your thoughts on that first idea. Let's see, I see Nordic Flower mentions, yes, daily spiritual walks are for me too. Light of Belenus says, definitely agree with the daily walk. Humans are meant to move, and being out, engaging in the environment, helps us appreciate the world around us. Yeah, those are definitely great comments. Let's see. Yeah, thank you guys for sharing your thoughts there. Oh, wow. Yeah, I see another comment here that I really like that says, I think one of the nice things about paganism is there is an ability to weave spirituality into so many of the normal practices of daily life. Yes, I definitely agree. Yeah, so that's the first thing, super simple. Another thing that's really simple, something we do every day, is we cook and we eat, right? I mean, you're probably eating 3 times a day. So thinking about ways to infuse paganism into your daily cooking, I think can be a really easy, more mundane way to get started. And for me personally, I love cooking. I have quite a large collection of cookbooks and kitchen gadgets, especially since this past year, when we've been spending so much time at home. I've taken the time to learn how to make sourdough bread, and I bought a pasta maker. So I've been having lots of fun trying out new recipes. And in paganism and in witchcraft too, the concept of the hearth is really essential. There's even a lot of folklore spirits traditionally that live in the kitchen or the fireplace or the hearth. And we also have hearth goddesses a lot of the time too. So spending time cooking, as simple as it sounds, really helps you interact with that hearth goddess tradition from way back when. I mean, really, when you think about early human settlements, it was just kind of one room. The house was one room, and the hearth was the centerpiece of that room. And even today, how we socialize and interact with each other, I don't know about you, but I often find people always gravitate towards the kitchen, right? When you go over to someone's house, you're like always hanging out in their kitchen. It's to me something kind of very like primal in us as humans. We gravitate towards the hearth, to where food is made, to where comfort is given. So getting involved in cooking, I think, can be a few different ways to connect with paganism. On the one hand, you're connecting with the concept of the kitchen spirits from folklore, connecting with the idea of the hearth goddess. You're also creating food, right? And if we are considering paganism as a nature-based spirituality, then fueling our bodies with natural whole foods is probably one of the best ways to honor the greatness that the earth has provided us. So it's not necessarily specific to any one pagan tradition, but I always try to cook with intention, to cook with gratitude, and really use that moment to appreciate the earth and the bounty that it provides. So I also tend to do a little kitchen witchery sometimes in my kitchen too. So I do sometimes kind of spell my food by using my intention or by using certain herbs. So that's another kind of fun thing to do. But yeah, I'm always kind of thinking about how I cook and how what I eat can connect to my pagan practice. And of course, on the wheel of the year, you also have the feast days, things like that. So prepping items for the feast days or prepping food for offerings, these are all things that are done in your kitchen. But just on the daily, just taking a second to appreciate the bounty of nature as you're cooking is just a great way to connect with the divine. So another thing you can do too on the nature realm, as we're kind of talking about nature, is bring nature inside, especially if you live in an apartment like I do. I don't have a big backyard that I can just hang out at. So I tend to grow like some herbs and some plants and bring that nature inside as much as I can. So really trying to infuse the natural realm into our daily life as much as possible, both by going on a walk, by cooking with natural whole foods, and by bringing plant life indoors. Those are just three really simple things that I do. And of course, you know, this is just, I'm telling you my practice. I mean, you're welcome to do whatever you'd like, and that's the beauty of paganism. But let me see what you guys mention here before I move on to the next point. Oh, I see a great comment here. The only time I incorporate magic into my cooking is when I make myself hot chocolate, because for me, chocolate is a magical food, and it is also closely linked to the history of witches in South America. Yeah, that's super fascinating. And the history of hot chocolate or cacao is really neat. It kind of reminds me of a scene in the movie Chocolat. And that, I think in the movie, it's kind of like a witchy movie. She's thinking about her like ancestors, or there's some type of flashback of a man in South America drinking cacao for the first time, and it being kind of this very mystical, transformative experience. So yeah, when you're thinking about food or specific pagan pantheons, if you're interested in a specific pagan path that you're following, eating that culture's food is a great way to connect. One of the things I've started doing since I am trying to work more towards the Norse and Celtic pantheon, specifically with Norse paganism. I've just picked up a few cookbooks recently that are Norse cooking and Norse baking, just from Scandinavia. Obviously, the modern culture there is different than the past, but still creating those recipes, making those breads is a fun way to connect with that history and to connect with that culture. Let's see. I see a fun comment here, also in the vein of Norse paganism. Sonoran Coyote says, I worship Freya, so I like to dedicate feeding/caring for and spending time with my house cat to her sometimes. That's a super cute way to honor Freya. If you're not familiar, Freya has a chariot that's pulled by cats. So cats are kind of a symbol of Freya. Let's see what else you guys are mentioning here. Jenna Livingstone is mentioning we try to eat lots of roots, especially in the cold winter days. Yes, eating local and seasonally are great ways to incorporate kind of pagan philosophy into your daily life, because if we are living by kind of a cyclical year, the wheel of the year, even if you're not Wiccan, pretty much all pagan paths really honored the concept of the cycle and the seasons. So making choices when it comes to your food and eating seasonally and locally, so it's easier on the environment, are two really great ways to incorporate paganism in the daily. Let's see. Okay, another kind of more mundane way that I incorporate paganism is through physical activity. And I know this one's going to sound a little weird, like how is that related to paganism? But, and of course, like I said, this is just me personally, but I don't spend a lot of time in the gym. I'm not really super athletic or anything. I just try to do yoga, several times a week and keep my body physically active and healthy. And it's kind of funny when you look into the history, because there actually is some historical precedent for honoring health of body and mind when it comes to different pagan paths. One of the funnier stories is from Celtic paganism, where certain tribes, they would have a ceremonial belt. And before a big feast day, so like before Beltane, for example, everyone would have to put on the belt. And if it didn't fit, that means they couldn't participate in the feast and the drinking. So there was a lot of incentive in coming up to the feast days to make sure you can fit in the belt so you can join in on the festivities. So being strong and fit for the ancient Celts was something that was really important to the community as a whole. Another place you see that is in ancient Greece, where, of course, we all know about the Olympics and everything like that, but the body itself was deeply important to the ancient Greeks, and the quest to achieve strength of body and mind, athleticism and philosophy in equal measure. I think Socrates has a great quote or something like that about how sad it is when a man never kind of sees his physical potential. I don't know the exact quote, but it's something like that. So trying to at least, stay active as much as possible is kind of a way that we're connecting with some of our ancient pagan practices. And one of the neat things about paganism, in my view, that makes it very different from Christianity, for example, is in paganism, we tend to celebrate the body. We celebrate food. We even celebrate drinking from time to time. And we also celebrate the pleasures of the body. Things aren't as sinful as in some other religions. Whereas in Christianity, as I've learned more about it, one of the things that really strikes me is how you're meant to kind of feel somewhat shame in the body or try to conceal it. In Christianity, you try to ignore the body and reach the divine. So when you look historically, people would wear those like hair shirts, or they'd scourge themselves or something like that, trying to either ignore the body or get the sin out of the body. In paganism, the divine and the body are like this, right? Like we experience the divine through our bodily sensations. So taking care of our bodies, to me, is something that I think is very pagan in essence. We're not ignoring our bodies, we're celebrating them in all of their forms, and we're striving for health as to the best of our ability, but not taking things, too hard. Obviously, like I said, pagans tend to drink often, so it is flexible, but I do think that that's an interesting difference between Christianity and a pagan worldview. Let me know your thoughts on that idea. While I take a sip here, I'll read your comments. Let's see, Dylan mentions, I think that is a great way to connect to the gods. Thor, I feel like, likes dedications during manual labor, and I honor Odin and sometimes Tyr and Freya with martial arts. Yeah, Thor is fascinating too because he's a god of the people. I mean, people always associate him as like a warrior god, and yes, he is to a certain extent, but he's also the god of farmers and that kind of manual labor. So if you are in a profession, for example, that's like a blue collar profession like bricklaying or something like that, or farming, even more so connected, those kinds of things really tie into Thor and what he's about. He's really kind of the everyday man god, versus Odin, who's a bit more mysterious, in my opinion. But yeah, that was a great comment. Let's see. Yes, people are mentioning the importance of self-care. Yeah, and I think just focusing on self-care can be a way to kind of bring paganism into the everyday. Let's see what else you guys mentioned. Graves mentions a funny comment about the Puritans. He says the Puritans lived their lives with the fear that someone somewhere might be having fun. That's true. And I make lots of videos about pagan holidays. And one of the things I find so funny about holidays like Yule, for example, is with Christianity and Christmas, they keep all the pagan stuff because the pagan stuff is fun. It's the feasting, it's the celebrating, it's the tree, it's the lights. So all that pagan stuff, people aren't going to get rid of those traditions because they're the most fun part of the holidays usually. Yes, pagans love to have fun. Let's see. Let's see what else we see. Rebecca has a really interesting comment. She says, I've started a workout routine guided by the moon phases and my own cycle. Before a new moon, I focused on yoga and walking in nature. Full moons are more dynamic workouts, and she's also working with the chakras. That is a super fascinating idea. I had not thought about tying my physical activity or my workouts to the moon cycles, but it makes a lot of sense, right? You're going to have different energy levels, and those are going to be cyclical, right? So might as well capitalize on that energy that comes with different phases of the moon. So during the month, you have more active days and more resting days. I love that idea. That's a super great comment. Let's see. Someone mentions a question here. What do you think about sporting events / competitions as a form of worship? That's really interesting. And I think, at least in ancient Greek culture, the Olympics and sport competition was preceded, or religious ceremonies became before the sport began. So there was always some type of offering or sacrifice before the sport. So at least in ancient Greek paganism, sport and religion were very much intertwined, as well as in Roman, I believe, too, though I could be wrong on that. And likewise, when you think about Celtic paganism too, and I believe it was it Beltane, where there were certain folk traditions that involved games. I believe in one of my previous videos I did on Beltane, I mentioned how in Scotland specifically, there is a tradition of the local farmers in the community kind of gathering together and playing this kind of modified version of Capture the Flag, and that may have some ancient pagan origins perhaps, and maybe a remnant of something that was done. And we do know before ancient Celtic holidays like Samhain, sport was very much included, especially horse racing. Horse racing is something that's really essential to Celtic paganism. So sport and ceremony very much intertwined in paganism. So that's a really interesting question that I hadn't thought about too much. But even when we think about the modern day Olympic ceremonies, you always start with the ceremony, right? The night before the Olympics starts, there's this huge kind of fancy display. There's like dance sequences, there's music, there's, the procession of the athletes. To me, that's very pagan in origin, even though, you might not notice it right away. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Another thing kind of on that topic of, caring for the body is caring for the mind. So meditation is something I tend to try and do every day. I am not great at meditation yet. I really like guided meditation. So I jump on YouTube in the morning and I usually do a quick 10-minute meditation in the morning, and then I do a 10-minute meditation before bed. So meditation is just a really great way to ground yourself, to clear your thoughts, which is essential, I think, for all of us, and reduce anxiety. And then also, sometimes with guided meditation specifically, I try and find ones that incorporate some type of visualization. Maybe it's like a chakra meditation and you're visualizing the chakras coming into alignment, or maybe it's a more elaborate visualization where you're imagining yourself in a forest or something like that. And these visualization meditative exercises can be really great later on if you choose, to do rituals or spell work. Visualization is an important piece of that. So a daily practice like meditation that allows you to build those visualization skills, to build that connection with your third eye or your natural psychic ability, can be a great thing to do every day. So I definitely recommend that. It really has helped me calm my anxiety. Once I started doing meditation and yoga daily, it really felt like a lot of the anxiety issues I was struggling with started to lift. So, and I know that when I stop or when I forget to do it, I start to feel that coming back. So that's something else I wanted to mention. You can, of course, do more advanced versions of meditation like astral travel or journeying. I have a video about journeying and astral travel if you're interested in learning more about that. But I usually use YouTube to find all of my meditation music or my guided meditations. I don't spend any money on that kind of stuff. Same thing with exercise and yoga. I just find a YouTube video and do it. So yeah, there's no need to get any fancy apps or anything like that. There's tons of great meditations online. I really like on YouTube, Jason Stevenson, I think, is the name of the channel that I go to for meditations a lot. Let's see. Yeah, so next we're going to go into a few things, and we're starting to get a bit more spiritual, a bit more witchy or pagan as we move along. Okay. Let's see, another thing I want to mention here as a way to bring paganism into the everyday is by doing it with your clothing or your jewelry. So clothing, I don't really have too much clothing that kind of connects with paganism, though I know a lot of people do, where they have a t-shirt or something that has a sigil on it or a specific symbol that connects with their pagan path. So that's definitely something you can do as kind of this daily reminder or this connection with your spirituality. Though one of the things I do is I do have several religious talismans or amulets, jewelry pieces that I wear to connect with my pagan path. So a lot of the times you'll see me wearing my Mjolnir or my Thor's hammer pendant. That's something that a lot of Norse pagans or heathens wear. And I usually wear that most days. I also sometimes will wear this piece. This is a replica of a Norse pagan staff. It's a Vova staff. The Vova were the seerists or the oracles in the Norse community, and this is what their staffs look like. So this is a silver replica of that. So this is a way for me to connect with Norse paganism as well as with the tradition of oracles within that practice. And this piece, if you are interested, I do collaborate with the brand Soldaseer. It's out of Sweden. It's this lovely lady that I've been speaking with, and she creates these beautiful, sustainable jewelry pieces, all based around Norse paganism. So I think I do have the link down below in the description, and I do have a promo code for you guys for 10% off. You just have to type in Scarlet10 is the promo code. So if you are interested in, getting your own talisman or something like that. And she has like scarves and other jewelry pieces as well. I just really like this piece because I love divination. So it's a great way to connect with divination from a Norse pagan context. But yeah, so those are just two kind of amulets that I wear, this one and the Thor's hammer. Back when I was a teenager and I was following a more Wiccan path, I did wear a pentacle necklace for a while. But there are so many, great places to find pagan jewelry. Though I would recommend you do your research, because a lot of pagan jewelry tends to be cheaply made or made in China. So if you are going to be investing in something that has a symbol that you feel deeply connected to, you might want to look around a little bit, and maybe even invest a little bit more, especially if it's going to be something that you're going to wear most days. But magical jewelry is just super fun. It's something I really enjoy, and it's a great way to bring that pagan belief system into your everyday. Yeah, so that's one thing that I wanted to mention there, just jewelry, clothing, anything that connects you to paganism. Let me see what you guys say. Okay. Yeah, it looks like a lot of you guys also wear pagan jewelry. Let's see, Mark has a question about a symbol, the Triquetra, and if it's Wiccan or, what did he say, Wiccan or pagan? Well, Wicca is a branch of paganism that you can follow. The Triquetra, I believe, is Celtic pagan, so it is older. So I do have a Triquetra necklace as well. I love that symbol. Let's see. Yeah, I think a lot of you guys are mentioning how much you also enjoy wearing magical jewelry or pagan jewelry. Ashley is mentioning I wear a double raven necklace representing Hunan and Munin, who are Odin's two ravens, thought and memory. and that she also has a Tree of Life necklace. So yeah, I do not have a Yggdrasil necklace yet, but I definitely should get one soon. That's the world tree from the Norse pagan cosmology, if you're not familiar. Um, yeah, oh gosh, lots of different symbols that you guys wear. Really interesting. Let's see. I see someone wears the symbol of Lu's shield. That's really interesting. And then some of you guys, I see Robert Parker is mentioning that he also has a Mjolnir pendant. Um, let's see. Yeah, a lot of you guys have Mjolnir pendants, and it's a really great way to recognize fellow pagans, you know, when you're just going about your daily life, because there's really, you know, no other way you can notice that I'm a pagan if you didn't know or you weren't familiar with my YouTube channel. Since I don't have any like real like tattoos that are Norse pagan or anything like that, but if you know I'm wearing my Mjolnir pendant, then probably someone could recognize. Though no one's ever come up to me and like asked about it, which is interesting. You know, I figured at least at this point someone would like ask me, "What is that? What are you wearing over there?" But yeah, so that's fine. Let's see. Yeah, great comments. Okay, so yeah, so another thing that I wanted to mention is prayer as an option for a daily pagan practice. So last Friday, for our last edition of Pagan Happy Hour, the topic was about pagan prayer and how pagan prayer was performed historically, how it's often performed today, and how you can incorporate it into your daily life. So prayer is something that you don't necessarily have to incorporate at all, or something that you have to incorporate every day. But if it is something you're interested in, there is lots of historical precedent for prayer. It's not just the Abrahamic religions that have prayed. So that's definitely something that is true to a large majority of pagan religions as well. And you can pray in different ways. A lot of times prayer involves some type of offering, you know, a little, you know, maybe you pour some meat or some alcohol or some fruit you leave outside, or you know, maybe it could be like a little piece of bread or something like that. So often offerings are kind of an essential part of that prayer, but you don't have to always do that. You can just give a prayer of thanks before meals, right? So just as how Christians give thanks through prayer before eating, us pagans can do that as well, and you can choose which deity you would like to honor or to give thanks to for the meal. Of course, there are plenty of harvest gods and goddesses that you can choose from depending on your pantheon. So doing a little prayer before food is definitely an easy way to incorporate prayer into the everyday. Or, you know, you can pray at other times as well during the day. So yeah, that's definitely something that you can incorporate. Let me see what you guys say about that. Let's see. Peter Parker says, yes, I try to pray every day. I follow the Norse path. So depending on the day, I will pray to different gods. Example, Wednesday for Odin. Yeah, I love that idea because the days of the week are named after the Norse gods. So each day of the week, honoring a different god could be a really great way to kind of switch things up when it comes to prayer. Let me see. Colin Brown is saying for prayer, I choose Demeter for food. Yeah, Demeter is a Greek goddess of fertility and the harvest. So that's a wonderful goddess to pray to and give thanks for food. Let's see. I see Lilycat Moon mentions, I pray a lot to Lord Ganesh. Yeah, so that's, you know, Hinduism and European paganism are very much intertwined. So I find that really interesting, and you can kind of look at Hindu practices if you're interested in seeing kind of a representation of how ancient European paganism might be, and that's because they come from the same people or the same root. So Of course, there's changes and everything like that, and obviously Hinduism has evolved so much, but Hinduism and the other European pagan religions, they all come from the same kind of ancient peoples, which is kind of neat. Let's see. Nordic Flower says, I think singing is also a really great practice. There is an interesting thing in traditional Sami culture called yoikin, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, where you sing as you feel, and you don't sing real lyrics, you just sing. That's super fascinating. The Sami people are really neat, and I definitely want to learn more about them. And of course, like you said, singing is a great thing you can do to honor the gods, even if it's as simple as singing while you're in the shower or something like that. Song, music, dance, all of these things can be done to help connect with the divine and the gods. Let's see. Daniel Jones Dillon asks, why did we lose so much information when it comes to European paganism? Well, part of that has to do with the fact that, at least among the Celts and the Norse to a certain extent, a lot of things were passed down through oral traditions. So things weren't written down, especially when it comes to Celtic paganism. They really didn't write down much. And since paganism was driven out by the conversion of Christianity pretty forcefully, I mean, a lot of people were killed, murdered, and all of that was kind of forcibly removed from the society. So since nothing was written, we can't really nowadays in archaeology go to the sites and dig up and find like a stone tablet or an ancient scroll. So we don't really know that much. Now you can contrast that to Greek and Roman paganism, for example, where obviously a lot was lost during the Christian conversion and so much was destroyed. But because they had more of a written tradition, a lot was still preserved. And so we know a lot more about Greek and Roman religious practices than we do Celt and Norse. All that we know from the Celtic Norse sources, predominantly that was written a couple hundred years later, mostly by Christians and monks and things like that. So they weren't writing from a first-person perspective. They were more just writing from talking to people that still kind of had that oral tradition, still kind of knew the folklore, knew the stories, and then they were just jotting it down. So a lot that we have from Norse and Celtic sources isn't always accurate, and we don't really have that much, unfortunately, compared to other religions that focused more on a written tradition. But yeah, great question. And I see Nick mentions a good point about Julius Caesar waging war on the Celts. So it didn't just start with the Christians. Julius Caesar and the later Romans did end up destroying a lot of Celtic culture as well. But yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. So another way that you can incorporate paganism or, kind of this spiritual path into daily life is through a daily divination practice. And that is different for different people, obviously. I know if you're a Norse pagan, you might work with the runes, for example. For me, I do some work with the runes, though predominantly I work with tarot. Tarot is not necessarily ancient. The symbols and the archetypes represented in the cards are ancient, but the cards themselves originally come from 1400s Northern Italy. But I really love tarot as a divination practice because it is so visual, and I'm very much a visual person, so I love having those images and those sacred symbols to draw upon. So for runes or tarot, drawing one as your kind of daily rune or your daily tarot card is a great way to bring a little bit of magic or a little bit of paganism into the everyday. If you didn't see on social media last week, I did finally release the tarot deck that I've been working on with my friend Jamie for 2 years. It's the Key Tarot. So this project took me 2 years to create. I've been a tarot reader since I was a teenager. So it's always been kind of a quest of mine to finally create my own deck. But yeah, so I've been using my deck now that it's finally printed and done as my main tool for my daily divination. And how I like to do daily divination is I'll usually just shuffle. And for me, I don't read reversals. I tend to view the cards as potentially having, both positive aspects and negative aspects. And I use my intuition to see how I feel like I want to interpret that card. What in particular about that image is calling to me. And then after I shuffle, and I usually shuffle till I feel kind of this intuitive signal. And it's different for everyone. For me, I kind of feel like it in my gut, kind of like, not like a punch in the gut, but just like a little like subtle, like feeling that I'm like, okay, I'm going to stop shuffling there. I'm going to flip over the card. And then I kind of just look at the card, I meditate on its meaning, I focus on what symbols are calling to me at the moment, and I use that intuitive guidance to add on to my knowledge of the symbolism and the historical meaning. And then I think about how that message could apply to my day-to-day. So I always draw a card in the morning. That way I'm able to kind of think about the card throughout the day and see if it kind of applied to my life. And it can also be a great journaling opportunity to record your card of the day, or if you're drawing runes, to write down which rune you got for the day. And of course, journaling in general is a great way to bring paganism into the everyday. If you do keep a book of shadows or a grimoire, and daily journaling is part of your practice, then that's another great way that you can just kind of keep things going each day. So yeah, so I wanted to share that with you. I do have the link below if you don't yet have a copy. It really is one of the best ways to support Pagan Happy Hour. If you are enjoying these Pagan Happy Hours, is to pick up a copy of my deck that I spent so much time working on. And I didn't do this alone. I did create it with my friend Jamie, who really helped kind of put the photos together, because the images are made up of models featuring people in the tarot and the pagan communities. So yeah, so that's what the cards look like. And daily divination is just such a wonderful thing that I do. It's not necessarily purely pagan in practice, it's more just spiritual, but for me, I find a lot of value in bringing it into the everyday. So another thing you can do too is, if you are a creative person, just kind of, spending a little time each day for a creative pursuit, whether that be drawing, music, and then during that creative pursuit, you can also ask for inspiration from the gods or inspiration from the muses, for example. So if you look at the Greek tradition, you have the muses, and there's a lot of different muses, and people would call to the muse to come to them before they would attempt to create art or music. So if you are involved in any type of creative process during the day, take a second to ask for assistance from the gods, ask for inspiration. I think in Norse paganism, isn't there a great story in the sagas about the mead of poetry that Odin drinks, and he gets drunk on the mead of poetry in this giant horn. So yeah, there's a lot of tradition when it comes to asking the gods for poetic or creative inspiration. So that's another kind of just fun way that you can bring in the gods if you are someone that likes to do art or music or dance or sing as a daily activity. Another thing you can do that's, probably one of the most simple things is keep your education up by reading a book about paganism. And I usually tend to read right before bed, so I'm usually reading like one or two books at a time. I usually try and read like a fiction and a nonfiction. And when it comes to the nonfiction books, I'm often trying to read a pagan book. Either that's a primary source or it's a secondary source. So it's maybe a more contemporary book that's just written about pagan traditions. But I do think it's also really important, if you are following a particular pantheon, to research what those primary sources are and to read those. For example, if you are a Norse pagan, getting yourself a copy of the Eddas and the Havamal and reading those. So yeah, definitely just reading in general. Of course, there's also plenty of great TV shows and movies that are somewhat historically accurate, somewhat you can learn a bit about paganism from too. So, you can do that too, but reading is, to me, a big part of paganism because we are reconstructing an ancient religious practice, which is really hard. And we don't have any centralized system or governing body to do it. So we have to kind of do all our own research. So it is a bit of a nerdy spiritual practice. So yeah, you kind of have to be prepared to do your research and to do your reading. And I am by no means an expert. Take everything I say with a grain of salt. I am still just learning, and it's going to be a lifelong process. And I think that's fun. I mean, I love reading about paganism. It's really endless material to learn from. So yeah, so definitely reading is a great way to incorporate paganism into the everyday, and also connecting with the community too. Even if it's as simple as, sharing on social media or commenting or just kind of being involved in your local pagan community or on your wider pagan community through online. That's great too, because we want to build community both online and in person. And if you feel about paganism like I do, that it's this really wonderful thing that should be shared and enjoyed by as many people as possible, then sharing about your practice, either to your local community or to the wider community through the internet, is a great way to stay connected, to share the wisdom of the ancients, to share the wisdom of the gods. So yeah, super simple, but a great way to bring paganism into the everyday. Yeah, so let's see, kind of refreshing going through all those points. We mentioned as ways to connect with nature, going for a walk, cooking as a pagan practice, connecting with those hearth deities, bringing plant life in, so bringing nature inside through plants and herbs. We mentioned meditation as a daily practice. We mentioned physical activity as a pagan practice. We mentioned clothing and jewelry, talismans, amulets, magical jewelry. We mentioned prayer. We mentioned divination, a daily divination practice. We mentioned reading, asking for the god's inspiration during creative projects, and we mentioned connecting with the community. So those were all of the initial things that came to my mind when I consider the topic of easy ways to bring paganism into the everyday. And of course, you can take it way more extreme. You could do full rituals every day, or do spell work every day, or leave elaborate offerings every day. But most of us have really busy lives, and we're not going to be able to do that. And for me, that's what the holidays are for. And I love the pagan holidays, and I really make an effort to give really good offerings on the holidays, but I don't always do that on the daily. So I wanted to share with you just some simple things, some of them more mundane than others, just easy ways to bring your spirituality into the everyday. But let me know what your thoughts are. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share as a way to bring paganism into the everyday. Because I still got a little bit of my drink left, so let me check out your comments here, and yeah, let's keep chatting. Let's see. Graves is mentioning again about the topic of the Great Christian Conversion of Europe. He mentions in the Dark Ages, almost all structure had fallen. The church was one of the few that survived, so it was very aggressive in going after the competition. Yeah, that is one of the biggest consequences of the fall of the Roman Empire, especially in Western Europe, because even when the empire was sustained in Byzantium, in the Eastern Empire, in the West, it had completely fallen. All the schools were no longer in session. The roads that the Romans created were in disrepair, and there was no governing organized body. And so when the church came in, the church being the only large, wealthy institution, people naturally gravitated towards that. They could kind of take control so much easier because everything had collapsed from the Roman Empire. So yeah, that's really interesting and really a sad thing, because it wasn't just, like we were saying earlier, the Christians that helped destroy remnants of Celtic paganism. The Romans did too. So when the Romans conquered Britain, for the most part, they didn't leave as much in terms of Celtic practice. Ireland, I believe, was never conquered by the Romans, and as such, they maintain a really strong folklore tradition today. That's why there's so many fairy stories and things like that out of Ireland, because they were able to hold on to their indigenous spirituality for so much longer. But even, then the Norse pagans invaded Ireland, right? So back when Ireland became fully Christianized, then the Vikings arrived, and they brought a little bit of paganism back in a way. But it wasn't fully sustainable. Let's see. Marissa is asking, do you have any special plans for Mbulk this year? It's coming up pretty soon. So I think Mbulk is going to be the topic of next Friday's happy hour. So stay tuned for that, and we will talk about Mbulk. Let's see. Kayla has mentioned that the hearth has always been the heart of any home, so there are tons of rituals you can do. Yes, definitely hearth magic, or some witches even consider themselves like a hearth witch. There's definitely a lot there when it comes to spiritual practice. Let's see, what else do we have? Let's see. Daka says, Slavic people kept most rituals, just gave them Christian interpretations. While our legends are lost, our practice is alive and well in folk tradition for the holidays. Yeah, I do want to make another video about Slavic paganism. I did an intro to Slavic paganism a while ago. I was thinking about doing a video on the pagan gods of winter, because there's certain Slavic deities that are associated with winter. But that is really interesting what the comment mentions here about how the Slavic people kept most of their rituals. They just kind of evolved through Christianity. And that is true to a certain extent in other areas of Europe. Just as we know, Easter is kind of a modern version of celebrating the Germanic goddess Ostara and the early fertility celebrations. Or May Day is kind of a modern version of celebrating Beltane. And of course, Christmas is basically Yule. So, even though so much was lost during the Great Conversion, we still have a lot of traces and a lot of traditional practices that are rooted in pagan philosophy and beliefs. But yeah, that's a great comment. Let's see. Nick is saying Celtic and Norse paganism is making a huge comeback here in the States, and that makes me happy. Yes, it is, and that's super exciting. That also makes me really happy. When I grew up, predominantly most pagans were Wiccans, but now there's so much more diversity, and not just Celtic and Norse pagans. There's so many different people practicing different pagan paths, and I think it's really wonderful. I mean, the more people that find paganism, I think that means the more people who are going to start appreciating the earth as a divine spirit, and that's probably a good thing. um, let's see. Let's see, what else do we have here? Let's see. I'm just checking your comments for a second here. Yeah, great comments. Oh, great. Let's see, I see some of you guys mentioning Reconstructionist paganism, and that's for the most part what I am. Of course, we can never fully reconstruct these ancient religions because we don't quite know enough, but in my view, we can do our best, and that's at least what I try to do. Graves says, the more pagans we have, it weakens the Christian hold on culture. I think that, the Christian hold on culture, especially American culture as a whole, is already starting to disappear, even with or without paganism. That's been a trend that's been going on for quite a while. People aren't really attending church or identifying as Christian. So yeah, that's been a big shift in even my lifetime. Let me see, what else are you guys saying? Let's see, Colin is saying, during my research on Norse and Greek mythology, the Abrahamic religions basically took a majority of practice and stories from them. Yeah, one of the things that I love about paganism and researching paganism from cultures, not just in Europe, but around the world, is they often have similarities when it comes to the stories and the sagas and the mythos. And each of those have certain kind of archetypal aspects to them. And to me, these are really eternal and essential to the human existence and the human spirit. And it's just expressed through the culture of whatever country or culture it came from. So even when you look at something as divergent as Shintoism and Norse paganism, when you look closely, there is still so much similarity because they are both focused around deities based in nature. And there's also both female and male deities. So all cultures from around the world began pretty much as animistic, so finding the divine in nature. And then when they moved to paganism, as they all did, it was always multiple deities and deities of both women and men. And that's something that when the Abrahamic faiths took over, really shifted. Nature was no longer a divine spirit, and the feminine role as a divine was devalued. So one of the great things to me about paganism is the fact, as a woman, I like the fact that there are goddesses, that the divine feminine is something not to be suppressed, but is something to be honored and respected for all the wonderful things that it brings to a culture. So both the divine masculine and the divine feminine exist in pretty much all pagan cultures from around the world. So it's like no matter where you come from or where you grew up, those ancient pagan spiritual systems were hitting at some type of essential truth about the divine existing in the universe and interacting and viewing that divine through the lens of multiple deities, and those deities reflecting how we actually live, right? So having both gods and goddesses. So yeah, I really feel like paganism is something that is eternal and can't ever fully 100% be suppressed because it represents something within us, like as humans, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does. But yeah, we're never going to get rid of that desire to view the natural realm as divine, and we just do it in different ways. Let's see. Peggy has a comment here about the pagan community, and that she doesn't really have any strong connections within the pagan community. And that's something that I have definitely felt from time to time. And for me, I moved to Texas, where I'm located now, like 6 months ago, and it's been in the middle of a pandemic. So I haven't really had time to, or the ability to connect with a local pagan community. But I've been able to do that through Pagan Happy Hour, and also by making videos and doing stuff online. So at least that kind of helps me reach that community vibe to a certain extent. And thank you all, for those of you who are here and likewise being part of this community. But yeah, it is really hard, and community is something I've talked a lot about in previous Pagan Happy Hours and in previous videos, because it's tricky. We as pagans, we don't really have any central organized system. We don't really have as many meeting places. So finding community is difficult, and something that I really hope we as a community get better at. So it's not just an online community, it's also an in-person community, because I want to meet some of you guys too, like in person. And I really hope after the pandemic's over, there are, going to be some large pagan events, and I'll even fly, to them. I just want to get involved with the community on a in-person level, not just online too. So, but it's something you have to definitely put a lot of work into, because it's not as easy to connect with an in-person community for paganism as it is for some of the other more mainstream religions. Let's see. Alexandra asks, can you do a video or talk about Christo-paganism? I'm still freshly out of devout Christian path because I got brave enough to leave, and I'm still searching for my new path. So Christo-paganism is interesting, and I don't really know if I have enough knowledge yet to speak on it. There is some neat things about the story of Jesus, and interpreting the story of Jesus as if he's a magician, and if he's able to perform these miracles by his interaction with the divine. But Christo-paganism as a whole is tricky, because pagan philosophy and understanding of the universe, of the cosmology, of morality is very different than paganism. I do have a video I would recommend watching about some of the key differences between a Christian and a pagan worldview. So Christianity and paganism are very hard to marry together. Now, when it comes to witchcraft, Christian witchcraft is easier to connect together, because witchcraft doesn't have to be a religious or a spiritual practice. It can just be an action, something you do, and there is a lot of historical precedent for witches who were Christian. One example is like the cunning men out of Britain, starting in the medieval period. They would have viewed themselves as Christian even though they were performing witchcraft. So Christianity and witchcraft, kind of possible. Christianity and paganism, not as possible, because the core tenet of Christianity is that there is one God and one God only, and that it is idolatry to believe in other deities. And paganism means the pan is kind of like all or many gods. So they are kind of opposite from each other in a lot of ways. So let's see, what do you guys say? Great comments here. A lot of you guys are mentioning how you have been Christian in the past and then you left the church. Let's see, Crystal's asking, did you say you're doing an Mbulk happy hour? Yes, I am doing an Mbulk happy hour next Friday. So we'll be celebrating Mbulk then, even though it's a little bit early, but I always do my happy hours on Friday. So we'll be talking about the tradition of Mbulk, what it represents, different ways you can celebrate Mbulk. I do have at least one video, maybe a couple videos about Mbulk already on my YouTube channel. So if you want kind of a snapshot on what Mbulk is and how to celebrate, I recommend checking that out. Let's see here. Kayla says, I hope pagans can be accepted just like everyone else. I really hope so too, though I think it's going to be a long process. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I just try to approach, my interactions with Christians with kindness, and when they go low, we go high kind of a thing. Like, I just try to present myself the best that I can, but there is a lot of prejudice still towards paganism, and I hope that goes away, but it doesn't look like it's going to be going away anytime soon. So we have to stay strong in our own internal selves and also stay strong as a community, because you would not believe the comments I get from Christians on YouTube. I'm just deleting comments right and left telling me to go to hell. So yeah, it's tough sometimes, but spending time with the community, like during these pagan happy hours, is really, a great way to feel not so alone. But yeah, let me see here. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, I think we are about ready to sign off today. So next week I will be releasing my Q&A video. If you remember last week, I asked on Instagram and my YouTube community page for all of your questions, and I got a ton of responses. So thank you for everyone that sent a question. I wasn't able to answer all of them during that video, but I answered a lot of them. So that video is going to be divided into your pagan questions, your questions about witchcraft, and your personal questions about me. And I just finished editing it, so it's like a 30-minute video, so it took a really long time. But that's going to be released on Wednesday, so stay tuned for that. And then Pagan Happy Hour for next Friday, we'll be talking about Mbulk. And again, if you have not picked up a copy of my deck, I do have the link below, and that's the best way to support these Pagan Happy Hours. So I hope you'll join me next Friday, and I want to wish you all a wonderful weekend. Thanks for stopping by and spending this Friday afternoon with me, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.